Welcome, readers. Today on Book Chat, joining me is my buddy read co-host, Classy Green. We'll be discussing the audiobook version of The Chill by Scott Carson. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Tamara Ford, and thank you for downloading this month's Buddy Read discussion featured here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. If you're new here, every week we get bookish with book discussions, book review shelf bites, and more. If you are wondering what is a buddy read, this is a feature where Classy and I select a thriller or mystery title that we both are interested in. Then we have a candid discussion about that book or audiobook. We even discuss it in our Facebook group Shelf Addiction Official during a live chat. So grab a glass of wine, a cocktail, a cup of tea or coffee, or whatever your drink of choice is, and settle in for this fun discussion. As always with book chats, there is a spoiler alert in effect, so you've been warned. If you enjoyed today's episode, please support this podcast by sharing it with one book nerd friend or on your favorite social media space. That would really help me out, and I appreciate you for doing it. The uncut video version of this podcast is available now on Patreon. Join us there for exclusive videos, including this podcast after show. You can find both Classy and myself on Instagram and Twitter. And if you're reading or listening to this audiobook and would like to contribute to the conversation, of course, be sure to join the Shelf Addiction Official Facebook group. I hope to hear your thoughts on this discussion. The links for everything I've mentioned are below in the show notes. We've got a lot to cover today, so we are going to jump right on in. Joining me is the Buddy Read feature co-host, Classy Green. Welcome back, Classy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Tamara, for bringing me back for another read.
You're stuck. You're stuck here forever.
Okay. Hey, you know what? I wonder sometimes.
Oh, no. What? No.
I mean, I don't take it for granted. How about that? I don't take it for granted. So I'm always pleased when we pick another book and we are back here.
Yes, good times. And today we are discussing the audiobook version of The Chill by Scott Carson. The audiobook was published February 11th, 2020 by Simon & Schuster Audio. The unabridged audio length is 14 hours and 38 minutes, and it is narrated by John Bedford Lloyd. And we did receive a copy of this from the publisher in exchange for an honest review. So that is what we will do. Classy, before we get started, would you like to share the synopsis with us?
Absolutely. In this terrifying thriller, a supernatural force set in motion a century ago threatens to devastate New York City. Far upstate in New York's ancient forest, a drowned village lays beneath the dark, still waters of the Chilliwackee Reservoir. Early in the 20th century, the town was destroyed for greater good, bringing water to the millions living downstate, or at least that's what the politicians from Manhattan insisted at the time. The local families settled there since America's founding were forced from their land, but they didn't move far, and some didn't move at all. Now, a century later, the repercussions of human arrogance are finally making themselves known. An inspector assigned to oversee the dam, dangerously neglected for decades, witnesses something inexplicable. It turns out that more than the village was left behind in the waters of the Chill when it was abandoned. The townspeople didn't evacuate without a fight. A dark prophecy remained too, and the time has come for it to be fulfilled. Those who remember must ask themselves, who will be next? For sacrifices must be made. And as the dark waters begin to inexorably rise, I hope I said that correctly, the demand for a fresh sacrifice emerges from the deep.
All right. So, yes, it was. Just like this book was a big mouthful.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so let me just say, you guys, this is also, we're here on Buddy Read, so we're reading this also in the Shelf Addiction Official Facebook group. And let me just tell you why this is really my pick, and I take full ownership of that pick. I really wanted something different than what we have been reading. We've been, kind of in the same zone of books like lately. And so I thought this would be a fun break because, the blurbs and people were classifying this as horror and, thriller and all of these fun things. So when I saw it, I said, oh, yes, I would love to read this. Thank you. But I have to say, for those, who have not read it, and you don't know much about it, in my opinion, I don't think this is horror at all, at all. I think it's more supernatural, and maybe it's a little bit of suspense, and definitely it's almost like a disaster book as well, like rolled into one. What do you think, Classy?
I agree with everything, and I would add historical.
Yeah.
There was a lot of information about dams and the making of dams and, the history of dams. So, and that may be the problem.
Yes.
All those, he just smushed all those genres together, or just it was like, a cornucopia of information that was just too much, and probably why it was over 400 pages and it dragged ass.
It was an info dump of information about dams and water systems and, the process and tunneling and just a
Yeah.
lot of that. And I did find myself a little bit zoning out when it started getting too explainy. Like, we started getting too deep into how, how things work and what happens
Right.
when we go here and what happens if that happens. And it's,
Yeah. It
yeah,
took away. I mean, I did too. I zoned out too. My attention span was zapped after a while, because it's like, oh gosh, we're going to go about these dams again, how the water system flows from New York to Chilliwackee. They're still in New York, right? It was
yeah,
just
they're in
different parts of
northern New York. They're like in
right.
Catskills. Is that what
Yeah.
it's called?
Okay.
Catskills?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just a bit much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it wouldn't have been as bad if I didn't, if I would have expected this to be historical or information over, and I won't say information overload, because no blurb is going to say, we're going to just overload you with information. But if I would have expected it to be more historical, or, as the examples are the genres you mentioned, we probably wouldn't have picked this book.
Right.
But
We wouldn't have. Honestly,
right.
if I feel like I didn't have a clear understanding of what this book was, and that might have been partially my fault because I didn't do a lot of diving and digging around trying to figure things out. I didn't read any reviews. I kind of just took it at face value, which I probably shouldn't do anymore. But I was just tired of looking for reading
Right.
synopsis. I was just tired, so I just picked it. But when I started looking after I finished the book, I found out that Scott Carson is the pen name for a New
Yeah.
York Times bestselling author and screenwriter. He lives in New York. Sorry, not New York. He lives in New England, just above a dam. Go figure.
Mm,
I did a little more digging, and the author is Michael Coriota, and
right.
I don't know him. And I was
I
looking
don't
at
either.
his books. I guess he wrote 14 books under Michael Coriota or Michael Corita. I'm sorry. He actually has a phonetic pronunciation of his name, Corita. There we go.
Now, is he suspense?
Now, the other books that I clicked on one of them, and it looks like people are tagging it as thriller, but
Okay.
mostly in mystery. But I don't really trust it anymore because
No.
people on Goodreads were tagging this as horror, and it is not. It is not.
No.
So, I
And
don't.
even in the library, that little magazine, I think we kind of saw it there too, and they mentioned this as like horror slash thriller suspense, and I think they even tried to say, hey, if you like Stephen King, you would like this, which again is bait. for someone who wants some horror or whatever, and it was misleading.
Absolutely. Because let me just give you a little definition of the horror genre. I looked this up because I wanted to be sure I was not being real brash about my classification. The horror genre is defined by the deliberate attempt to invoke a psychological reaction of terror, fear, shock, and revulsion in the audience. It is not a requirement that it has in a supernatural element. Okay, so it can have, I might have butchered that last sentence. It is not a requirement that it has a supernatural element. So horror does not have to be supernatural, but it will evoke terror, fear, shock, revulsion, and all of these other things. This book gave me none of that. None of that.
And I don't read horror, so when you pick this, I'm like, okay, I'm open. I need to, broaden my horizons. And I'm reading and I'm like, I don't feel terror. I don't feel the goosebumps. Like I've read some Stephen King and probably haven't finished any because of those feelings that his books evoke. This did none. I mean, It probably wasn't even creepy to me. It was just more like mythical or I won't say mythical or just like those old stories that your family's just old folklore maybe. That's the kind of feel I got.
Because supernatural, according to Google, is anything beyond natural. It can be good or bad or both.
Okay.
And I feel like in this book, I don't think the supernatural ghosts were actually evil. I think they were just angry,
Right.
So, and of course, we go back to the lore that, what's the girl's name? Jillian learned as a child. That is like from kind of like culty, it's kind of like cult type stuff. And these people, I guess it just happened to be that they all turned into these supernatural ghosts and they were kind of having to do this deed because that's what they signed up for.
Right. The sacrifice.
Yes.
Right.
But it wasn't scary though.
No, not. I was waiting on the scare. I was waiting on the terror. And I did not get it.
I think we could have got more terror or even like OMG moments if, for example, when Aaron, had said that he had killed Mick Fleming at the very beginning. He said, I killed him. He's in this, reservoir, whatever. He's in there.
Right.
And he comes strolling out like, yeah, none of that happened. I don't know what you're talking about. For a minute, that was kind of odd. But I think if they played on that a little more, the author,
Yeah, he totally went off. He left us hanging, I think would probably be the best for me with that. He could have, at that moment, he could have just did so much more because I felt, like you said, that would have been the climax right there. Mm-hmm. But it didn't seem to climax to me until like 76% of the book when, oh God, was it when he found out that his dad was dead? I can't remember. I did mark the book, but it seemed like that was a good climax. But he let us fall, and then it happened. Another moment happened, and it didn't tie together for me. But I agree. That was that moment where I felt like, okay, what is the story about? Because where the supernatural, I killed him. He fell in the water, and then I'm like, so now Aaron is going to go to rehab. And he really shouldn't be going to rehab. Mm-hmm. I was excited then. It was like, okay, I can't remember what part that was. It might have been where I was at, maybe like that 53%. No, that wasn't 53%, was it? Maybe 30.
I had a hard time keeping up with the percentages because of the way I was consuming the audiobook.
Oh, that's right.
It didn't have clear. I put this on my iPhone, and for some reason, this book would not mark the percentage. Like any other book I download on the iPhone, I can see, on the library page, okay, what percentage am I? But for some reason, it would not snag it on these files. I don't know what the problem was, but so I had a hard time telling how much longer I had to go.
Right.
Which I think also contributed to my angst of it all, because I could not figure out, well, are we near the end? Are we in the middle? What's what? Because like there was one other part for me that seemed like it could have had more of that scary aspect. I was waiting for it. And that is when Anders Wallace, the ghost, kind of took possession of Mick Fleming, and he was kind of talking to him. Yeah. He was talking to him, and then he was acting through him. So I thought those parts could have been elevated a little more to just bring up the creep factor a little bit more.
Right. And now that you say that, I think now I realize that might have been because we did the audiobook. I did notice there were times where the narrator, even though we're listening to Mick Fleming, his tone did change a little bit. And I'm like, whoa, what was that? And that probably was what I heard. Mm-hmm. Anders, speaking through Mick Fleming.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that would have, because, you could kind of tell that Mick was being possessed or spoken through. Anders was taking over Fleming. And I think you could only tell those moments because the author would mention, this isn't normal for Mick Fleming. This is a different personality. And that was just too much. You didn't have to give us, I think he could have done more. That was, so obvious. Give us more meat so we know that this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think I would have also liked to know, like, what exactly swayed Mick to Anders' point of view? Because when Mick was kind of like coming through, like when he needed to explain things to people, mm-hmm. It was him using his knowledge as an engineer.
Right.
Like what happened? Like we know he was like down in the reservoir or something, like looked like he was floating on water, according to Aaron. Right. Remember that part? And he was talking to someone, but he didn't know who he was talking to. I would have liked to hear more of that, or at least get the little part where he started to agree that, everyone needed to learn the lesson. Right. Like when did Mick start being cooperative and agreeing? Right. What was the trigger?
Right. Like, when did he drink the Kool-Aid? It at one point, I felt like when he fell in that water after Aaron hit him with the bottle, like, did he go into like a vortex and all of us, that's what, like, was he transported? And once he went down there, you are now a member of the underground.
That's what I thought at first. I thought the catalyst was the water.
Right.
But it can't be, because there were ghosts down in New York in the tunnels. And I'm like, well, that doesn't connect, because right now the water doesn't connect in that way.
Right. Because that's what the end result was opening that tunnel. Mm-hmm. And then I also thought it was the water too, because Aaron mentioned in his book, listen to the water. So I'm like, okay, it's the water. But it wasn't the water.
It can't be. So It was kind of weird as well when like ghosts started popping up for Deshaun, Gillian's father.
Right.
That was a little, didn't quite fit exactly, especially because I felt like it was expressed that Deshaun didn't believe anything that was going on up there, and he thought they were all nuts.
Right.
Not that he actually believed any of it.
Right. And I didn't see the connection of Deshaun seeing ghosts as well, because in my mind's eye, the connection would be the folklore. Unless I missed this part, did Gillian's mom teach him. I felt like Gillian, her mom, and the grandmother, usually with folklore, it's passed down through generations. I have old folklores in my family. You probably have some, heard some stories. And Deshaun was basically the father. They weren't married. He only heard these little stories when he would come visit Millie, whatever the mom's name was, and she would kind of take him in that room. But I mean, he wasn't indoctrinated. You know what I mean? I just didn't see where he all of a sudden got the visions of the ghosts. And like he said, some of the other sand hogs or whatever they call them probably saw these people too. So again, that missing piece, I wasn't sure how Deshaun, besides being Gillian's dad, was able to see what Gillian possibly saw. And I was not even quite sure how Aaron saw these things, except for his family was the family that decided to open up the dam. Is that or drown the city?
Honestly, I can't really remember exactly what their link is, but I know that Mick Fleming is the grandson of the guy who originally started working on the dam.
Right.
So, or he created it or designed it or something like that. So I got that link, but I don't know exactly how the Ellsworths tie in as far as historically.
It was their family is the one, I believe, that opened up some kind of agreement and let the city drown or whatever. Yeah, they had something to do with it. With was his dad the mayor or his grandfather like the mayor of the city that allowed that town to be drowned? Is it Galesburg or that, the little city?
Oh, so he kind of agreed to, like, okay, I think I know what you mean, but I didn't recall that.
Yeah.
Not to say it's not, but
I know. Yeah. It was a lot. It was another problem with the book is it was too long and there were too many characters. There was too many jumping arounds of point of views. I wasn't sure at one point who, like when we were thinking about fantasy cast, towards the end, I kind of figured out who were the main characters. But for a while there, it was just so many characters that we could have chosen from. And it was just hard. It was a lot.
Okay, so I'm gonna compare this to something that is very different, but I feel like what the author was trying to do reminded me of what Justin Cronin did do.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed his trilogy, the Passage trilogy.
Okay.
And that was a very big, those 3 books were dense and long with lots of characters and lots of movement through time. But that was real horror with vampires and stuff. But, his story spanned hundreds of years. But there was no confusion as to who's talking, what's what. Like, we would jump from this set of people to another set of people to another, we would follow groups of people. And I think that is what Scott was trying to do as far as like, we get Gillian's point of view. We learn some history from Deshaun. We get a little bit of history from Mick's family. We get a little bit, and through telling these old stories, we get the bigger picture. I think that's what he was trying, but I feel like the connective tissue wasn't quite, even though he gave us a lot of information.
Yeah.
It just didn't settle in the way that I think it should have. Like, I feel like I should have known these characters. It took me a while to figure out who was who at first. And what the hell was going on?
Right. Because there were times where he spent a lot of time on one character and then all of a sudden they were dropped out. And then the ones who kind of stayed throughout the book, I felt like he didn't give us enough information. Like Mick Fleming, all we knew, I mean, there was more to it, but the gist, I think, like when we come to the end of these stories, like when we pick our characters, we can say, this is so-and-so. And with Mick Fleming, all I knew about Mick Fleming was his grandfather was the builder of the dam, and he was the engineer who was coming in to check on the dam.
Mm-hmm.
And this man played a key part in this book. You know, Aaron, we learned a lot about, who I liked. Not too many of these characters I liked. I really didn't. I felt like Jillian was a key player, and we didn't learn a whole lot about her.
No.
Except for, no, we learned, you know, as a child, the story, and then her dad went and picked her up. And then all of a sudden we're brought in, she's brought back in when Aaron, so-called kills Mick Fleming. So, again, I just felt like, you know, we learned a lot about grandma. It's like, pick your main characters, give us all the information you need about them, all these secondary characters, you know, just give us bits and pieces, as you say, to connect the tissue, to make this full body of the story.
Yeah, if I had to guess the main characters, I would say definitely Gillian. I would say Aaron, and I guess Mick Fleming / Anders Wallace, because they're pretty much the same person for the whole book, pretty much.
Right. Yeah.
And everyone else was kind of background noise, I think.
And out of those three characters, we knew the most about Aaron, probably. We knew, I mean, if I would ask you about Jillian, what would you say?
Well, you know, and at first, okay, so I'm going to get into some physical characteristics. At first, when I first started, you know, Deshaun was telling his story, I'm like, Deshaun, is he black? And then as I'm reading, I'm like, wait, is he not? And then I'm reading, I'm like, wait, he is black. So then, because, you know, just the description wasn't like vibrant in my mind. So, I mean, obviously
the name was vibrant, but the description was not.
Right.
Yes.
So then I'm like, okay, I think he is. But then when they talked about Gillian a little bit, I'm like, oh, clearly she's mixed. They talk a little bit about her hair, I think, and her eye color or something. Right. So I'm like, okay, so yes, her daddy is black. Okay, thank you. So I finally figured it out.
Right. Her blue eyes contrasted against her dark hair, and then she had her dad's dark, you know, skin color and right. But I mean, as far as other characteristics, all we knew was she was a mixed child. Her grandmother killed herself, and her dad
killed herself.
Her mother killed herself. She worked for the public water system, and her dad took custody of her after grandma died. Right?
Yeah. Well, she I think she was with the police though, not the water system. But like it was weird. Like that part wasn't clear to me either. I feel like she's a police or some type of official person, but not like a water person. Because remember when they were talking about like we service the same water, but I'm
over that
a cop and you're you know, like a water and sewer employee, you know, how they kind of clash or whatever.
Yeah.
So I feel like she's a cop to some level. I could be wrong, but that's like my inkling.
Right.
I know for the water, you know, for that part of the water.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I know. But you did all this damn information, but you really couldn't give us a clear explanation of what Gillian's job was. But anywho, but that's what I'm saying. Out of those three main characters, that's what we know about Gillian. And then for her to, you know, at the end, you know, learn that we kind of had an idea that she was supposed to sacrifice herself too. I mean, it looks like history shows that this whole family sacrificed themselves for this tunnel or this, you know, the opening of the dam. But yeah, it was just too many characters and not enough information for the main characters for me.
Yeah. I think like, okay, so I did listen to this pretty quickly. And I feel like had I not crammed it, so quote unquote, maybe I would have had more time to digest in between, and maybe it might have helped a little bit. Like I don't feel confused right now, but I feel unsatisfied. So I get what he was trying to do. It was very ambitious, I think. And I did enjoy like the supernatural aspects. I think I like those the most of the story. So I liked seeing the ghost. I liked, you know, kind of like the idea of them like seeing the ghost under the, in the tunnels, in the water. That was kind of like I could see that visually, and that was appealing to me. But everything else, I'm like, well, and then at the end there, at the very end, after they save the day, and then Gillian and Aaron are like holding hands in the car, or she's holding his thigh or something. I'm like, okay, I was wondering that whole time if the author was going to put them together at the end, although I feel like it wasn't needed at all. I don't know, I just don't like when they have to put a relationship aspect in a story like this. It's not needed.
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, there were times where the author would repeat lines. Like when I think there was another section of the book where they mentioned that Gillian, they were riding around and Gillian put her hand on his thigh, and then they mentioned it again. And I'm like, didn't I just read this? But I almost at one point thought that they were telling the story from somebody else's point of view, but I'm like, no, it's still Jillian or whoever. But again, we are seeing where they're saying she's put her hand on his thigh again. And I'm like, what is that about? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah, and then that little part, I guess they said something, I guess Gillian, was from her narration. She was saying they need to decide where to live, or they need to live in that town because they need like people who know the old stories.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so you guys are together, I guess? I don't know. Maybe just some trauma, a disaster threw you guys together, and there you are, I guess.
But it was weird.
It was weird.
It was really weird. It was like all of a sudden, insta love.
Yeah.
Where the hell? Where did that come in?
Okay, so I don't read a ton of romance, but I do read some paranormal romance, as you guys know. And the only time I buy insta love is in a paranormal setting, because then you can explain it by fates or destiny or whatever, because it's paranormal. Who cares? But in a real world type setting,
right?
Come on, I don't.
Right,
don't
like
do
you were
it.
saying with paranormal, there's some kind of connection. If it's the, animal instinct, or just something where they have no control. It just happens. This, if they would have explained that this trauma caused them to come together, I could have understood it. But yeah, it didn't fit for me either. I could have just seen a relationship, a friendship.
Yeah, I think a friendship would have settled better with me. I almost feel like the author threw that in for the women. So women reading, here's a little snack romance thrown at you on the side.
At the end.
Yeah, at the end. I just don't do it. Like, why do it? I mean, they could be friends, they could be colleagues at one point, I don't know. I just don't think that was necessary, but
no, it wasn't. Not at all.
Yeah.
I know this was a hard pill to swallow, and I didn't read this fast. I tried to take my time because I wanted to be fresh for today. And I think, when did I talk to you? Saturday?
I think it was like Saturday,
Sunday. And I was trying to drag it out so I could be fresh And I was like, it was interesting, something I've never read before, but intriguing. And I think at that point, I think I might have been at the 53% mark. And it just really, for me, it kind of went downhill from there. Like you said, I was confused. I'm confused still. Maybe later, maybe I can digest and understand a few things. But it just jumped around a bit too much for me. And I was expecting suspense.
Yeah, and I think, kind of like what we mentioned earlier, it's just kind of all of the information bogs down, it slows down the action scenes.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, you expect the action scenes to be really snappy, fast.
Fast paced.
Do.
Yep, fast paced.
You want to feel some suspense while they're
Can I give you an example of great fast pace and you read it too?
Mm-hmm.
No exit.
Yes.
No exit. And that's what I was looking for. And this was no fast pace. But I mean, now and you would think water can, if we want to go with water can be fast paced and whatever. But there was nothing. This was probably a darn trickling creek.
It was slow.
It was so slow, but no exit was fast.
I think, let's compare them, real fast for the sake of what we're talking about. So no exit took place basically in one spot at a truck stop in a blizzard. So it was really focused on the character development. I think it relied heavily on that, not just necessarily plot, because there weren't a whole lot of moving parts necessarily.
No.
But you still had the suspense, you had the tenseness, it moved fast, it read fast, and this was almost polar opposite. We're in two different places. We have a lot more characters. I mean, it was also, I guess the snowstorm wasn't a natural disaster, but it held them, it was bad. You're
right. It was very bad. The roads were closed. The city was closed down.
Yeah. So it's this kind of thing, when you watch disaster movies, right? You go to those movies for the fast pace, the explosions, whatever, the monsoons, whatever you're going to get while you're watching a disaster movie.
Right.
And we don't really know everything behind the scenes that caused the disaster to happen. We know a little bit.
Right.
But we don't know everything. So just too much information, I think, bogged down the action scenes overall, and maybe even the plot pacing. It just slowed things down.
It did. Because once you start telling me the mechanics of the dam and all that, now I've switched over. My brain has basically switched over to I'm in a history class.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer suspense, thriller, not even horror. Now you have just given me a social studies, whatever, or history class on the mechanics of a dam and water systems.
Yes.
And then you try to bring me back. All you have to do is just give me some little bits and pieces. Now, I will give him credit that he did his research. He did a hell of a lot of research, but he didn't have to give us everything.
Yeah.
He did his homework, no doubt.
He did.
But he didn't have to give us everything.
No. And like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the highlights for me were the supernatural parts, were the ghosts, were those interactions with the regular people.
Right.
And even kind of the creep factor of learning that old story and learning about it would have been, I think I would have liked to learn a little bit more about the cult and how, if we're going to go there with information, I mean, tell us how we got here. How did we get here? More than I cared about the mechanics of the dam. The dam was the consequence of this. I want to know about before if we're going to go there. We got a little bit, but we could have got a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially Grandma died. The way Grandma, everyone seemed to die differently. Her mother drove herself into the water. grandma died with the hood over her head and the chains. And, at first I was like, please explain, because it kept mentioning the black hood that she had over her head. And I was like, please, because I thought this was going to be something important, an important piece. Like maybe this was part of the cult, because we never did learn how her mother died until later. I think Aaron asked, but I'm thinking maybe this cult, that's why she knew it was her grandmother in the water, because that black hood was symbolic to them.
That's what I thought it might have been. Yeah.
See, you too. I was thinking maybe this is something that these townspeople or her family did, and she knew the history that every last one of them who sacrificed themselves wore black hoods and chains to make sure, basically, that they will drown.
Because that grandmother's death was so dramatic. I mean, she's like, "Oh, let me put the hood on. Let me scoot over to the edge. I got the chains." I'm like, "What the heck?" But the mom, she just drive off the cliff. I'm like, okay. So.
Yeah, so the two stories didn't match for it to be. So again, if you're going to do this, be consistent with your story. Because I mean, usually, I don't know. Usually with folklore and cult-like things, they kind of do the same thing. It's consistent with. You can kind of tell this was that cult because they all did this. And granted, they all went into the water, but, the mom went a different way and grandma went a different way. So,
not to like rewrite the book or anything, but I feel like, okay, so if the story was presented to me like this, we meet Gillian as a child. We stay with her. I don't know, for a couple of years. We go through some experiences with her, real time. We get some feelings from her. She's believing the shit. She's freaked out or whatever. And then maybe in part 2 or 3, we flash forward. Maybe we end where her grandmother dies and her father comes. And then we flash forward. And then she's riding back to her hometown, and this shit starts happening. So I feel like maybe Gillian should have been the anchor. She should have been the anchor for the entire story.
Yeah.
And that would have changed things, I think.
I think so too, because at one point, when she tied her dad to that fence or whatever, I was like, oh shit, she has drunk the Kool-Aid. She, I thought she was about to sacrifice herself, because remember she said, remember when I scared,
she was going to,
but remember she said, remember when I used to scare you, you should be afraid. And granted, she did change her mind, but like you said, your storyline would be perfect. It's almost like there's so much of that book he could just cut out and maybe rearrange some parts.
Yes. Or add, like I said, add like some prequel. Give us some background, like real background on Gillian's, how she was raised. Because maybe we should know what a creepy child she was, so that we would know why her daddy was scared of her. I mean,
because he said, apparently, besides drawing, there was something, some reason why the dad didn't want to take her.
Yeah.
Besides being afraid to be a father and raising her. And, and even that connection with her and Steve, the officer who rescued her, or was the first one on the scene when grandma passed away. So, they had some kind of, that could have been just, a little slight storyline in there, but he just filled up the book. I bet if I went and got that book and probably tagged as much information about the dam, it was probably over 50% of dam and water. And,
I mean, we even had a good amount of, I guess not too much, but we had a decent amount of exposure to, how the different groups that took care of the dam hated each other.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a couple of pages of the sheriff acting crazy.
Right. It was like the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Yeah. I'm like, what is going on? Like, he was very angry, and it was just too many. Like I said, I feel like Gillian should have been the anchor of the story. Yeah. It should have been all her
Yeah.
kind of still having these interactions with all these different people. But if she was leading the story, it would have read a little different.
Yeah. And I did like, again, like when she took Aaron back to her home, her childhood home, and all these things. Yeah, I see where, like you were saying, I see where he could have gone, but he got distracted and went a totally different route.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like it's a great concept. I feel like I'm down for the concept. I really could see the potential there.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're down for like a slow, burn of a book, and feeling okay with a average ending, definitely.
Right.
I mean, because to me, it wasn't, you got the problem was solved at the end, which is good.
Right.
We want that. We didn't want disaster.
No.
So the disaster was averted.
Right.
But there was no aha, or, oh my God, it was so daring. Actually, I think the most daring thing was Aaron swimming that whole way in that way. And that even, I did not feel the stress that I wanted to feel in that kind of situation. I mean, he's almost out of air.
Right.
But that was the most exciting part about the takedown at the end, is he got all the way over there.
Right.
He almost died. He talked himself down from panicking because he's like, oh my God, I gotta calm myself down or I'm gonna die. And he made it all the way there, and he's like knocking on the thing. Hey, I'm over here.
Hello.
And they're like, what?
What do you mean?
Right. So he saved the day. I mean, that was the most exciting part, and everything else was kind of like,
right. And I felt good for him. It was redemption, for him, for all the crap he sent his dad through. And, and I could even see those two plot lines, with Jillian being, the scary girl, and Aaron being, the child of the sheriff, and, redeeming himself by helping. But yeah, I think the tension with him swimming probably was higher when he tried to save Mick Fleming. Remember? And he was like, I'm going down and my lungs are filling up.
Yeah.
That was tension there. That was more tension. Yeah, that was more tension than him saving the day at the end of the book.
I think you imagine, you think you found him, and then instead you get the skeleton. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And then I start thinking, how many skeletons are in that
down
thing?
there? Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Like there are lots of people down there, and I'm sure they recovered some of them, but not all of them. You know what I mean? Like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
the same way when the flood came and they were, saving those bodies. And again, we had all that, which I thought was fodder. It was like, did we really need to have the scene of them rescuing people?
We didn't need to see that.
No.
We know that people are in the background working to rescue.
Yeah.
We could have skipped that, and they just could have came across each other on the road. We didn't need to see that.
No.
But when that was going on, what I really wanted to happen, here I am again. I was waiting for Aaron because, again, the water. I was thinking about the water, and his daddy was killed, and then he didn't die in the water, but he was put in the water.
Right.
So I was waiting for him to see a ghost of his dad or something. I'm like, that. You thought that?
I thought his dad was going to turn into a ghost.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Like, oh my God, you get to say bye to your dad or something, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I thought that was going to happen. Well, and again, I thought the water was the catalyst, that once they went into this water, it was like when Mick Fleming killed them, I thought he was recruiting. Okay, this is my thoughts. When he killed Arthur and the sheriff, I thought he was recruiting people to help. So, putting them in the water, because he didn't just leave them on the land. Yes. He put them in the water. So I'm thinking they go into this water, and lo and behold, they're going to turn. Yes. Yeah, that's what I thought was happening.
Yes, and that would make sense because there was a part in this book where Aaron told Gillian that the woman he saw looked tired. You know what I'm saying? So it made me feel like, not all of them were there because they wanted to be there. They were just like workhorses. You know what I mean? Right. Do your job. Help us do this thing. And like, not everybody was a sacrifice, you know? So that would have played into that if that's what happened.
Yeah. And that's what I thought, that they needed more workers because this thing was getting bigger. I mean, if you think about it, when grandma or prior to that, the city was smaller. And this time, New York City and all that, population has grown. So I'm thinking they need more people. But
I mean, and they made us, the author made us think they needed more people, the way Gillian was like, I'm so sorry. I should have been. And she was like 2 seconds from taking the shovel or hammer or whatever it was they were trying to hand her.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm like, well, do they need more or do they not need more?
Right. Exactly. Or is it just something to, I don't know. We could go on and on.
Yes, but we'll stop there. But because of this, you guys, so on the day that we're recording, we both finished this audiobook. And I think we were kind of, at the end of it, I needed to kind of decompress a little bit and kind of just let things settle in for a couple hours. So because of that, we didn't really have time to do our usual fantasy cast. We were both kind of like, woosah.
Yeah.
Let me.
Right. So, and it was, I don't know about you, but I really couldn't picture anyone. I mean, I could have, if we had a little more time, I would have just picked some people. But I never, while reading the book, could visualize the characters. I mean, I knew Aaron had a swimmer's body. Mick Fleming, I probably have to go back, but
we did not talk at all about that creepy ass photographer. Like, what was that garbage?
Yes, I forgot about him.
He just shows up to like take
pictures and document. Yeah, that was,
So I'm like, is he the Grim Reaper? I mean, what is he? Like, what's going on?
Because they said if you take pictures, you steal the soul. And and again, he left us hanging about what was the sole purpose of catching Hubris or whatever his Curtis Hubring or whatever his name was, which was a algorithm or something. I think she mentioned that she had to figure out as a child.
Yeah.
I'm like, you are giving me way too much information. It was overload.
I don't think we needed the photographer at all. I couldn't figure out what his purpose was. And then at the end there, he came, he talked to, Deshaun, and then he makes his way on down. And then I guess when he realizes that things aren't going to work out, he leaves because he won't have anything to document.
Right, because nobody won't let, I'm like, what? Again, another character that just drops in, it was not needed.
Yeah. So
it's not needed.
Fun times. Okay, well, we do have 2 more things to do, so I think we should take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the audiobook narrator, which we haven't done yet, and we're going to give our rating. So stay with us, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by the Shelf Addiction merch store. Check out all the bookish t-shirts, notebooks, mugs, and more. Don't miss out on these original designs, perfect for any book nerd. Support the podcast and visit shelfaddiction.com/merch and pick up your next favorite bookish item. Okay, and we're back. So let's talk a little bit about the narrator, John Bedford Lloyd. I feel like I've seen his name before, like a lot of times.
Okay.
I'm going to look him up right quick.
Yeah, his voice didn't sound familiar to me as far as any books I've read, but that doesn't mean anything.
I feel like I've seen his name a lot, or I don't know necessarily that I've listened to him a lot, but maybe when scrolling through Audible, I've seen him a lot.
I think I've read somewhere that he's done some thrillers. He's really known for
He's done some
narrating
Dean
a lot of
Koontz.
thriller books.
Yeah.
Oh, Dean Koontz.
Yeah. He's done some, what is this? Oh, army stuff? I don't know. I just don't know.
I'm just looking at your face, Nikki.
Oh, sorry. If you guys come on over to Patreon, you can see my crazy faces. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, your face, your expression was priceless.
I have that quizzical, I'm confused look.
Yeah, you're like,
maybe I haven't seen, I mean, he's done Michael Crichton, but that's old. Maybe,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I imagine that. Maybe his name just seems familiar. Anywho, what'd you think about his performance?
It was okay. I won't say it was bad. I felt like at times his voice sounded the same for Jillian, as it did with some of the, with the male characters. There was a little distinction, but there wasn't a lot. And like I said, too, I did notice some, and I don't know if it was the editing or him, a change in the tone. It almost seemed like it got louder, but maybe that was him, as I brought to I was asking you, when Anders was speaking through Mick Fleming, that might have been what he was trying to do. But I think, too, this story was kind of tough.
Yeah. To
try and narrate and bring forth what needed to be done. So I'll give him a pass. I would say he did okay.
Yeah, overall I liked him. I definitely feel like he added to the story, to the experience, because if he wasn't as good as he was, I would have been like, oh my God, I can't.
I'm done. Yeah.
Right. So he definitely upped the ante a little bit, which was fabulous because that got us through the book.
Through it. Yep. You're
so
right.
I think overall I had no real complaints about him, but I do think that it could have been nice to have one more distinctly different voice.
I think so too. I think that would have helped us understand the story a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, that would have helped.
But he did a good job with the material, I think. I think the editing was fine. I think I heard maybe one thing that sounded like it could have been added later. I can't remember what section it was, but I just heard something that kind of jarred me a little bit.
Okay.
It was really brief, so I don't know if it was in post-edit or what. But other than that, Simon & Schuster Audio, they always do a good job with their production. So the production value is good. The narrator was good.
Good.
I think if you like this kind of thing, if it's your stilo, you know what I mean? I think you'll like it.
Yeah.
If you have tastes that align more like myself, this will be different for you.
I agree. I was just looking for more fast pace. You said thriller, your synopsis, or and even in the synopsis, I think, the synopsis was okay. But maybe like you were saying, the tag in Goodreads and the tag that they had in that Library Reads magazine listed it as thriller horror, and the blurb from Stephen King. So, yeah.
Okay. So let's rate this thing. Let's rate it. Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I gave it a 2.
Okay.
That's what I mean. I didn't feel like it was okay. I felt like, I gave it a 2. It was subpar for me.
Okay. That is fair. And I actually gave it a 3 only because I really liked some aspects of it. I think I'm giving it extra credit for the possibilities. I think I'm giving a little extra for the narrator. Okay. But it's definitely something that is not for everyone.
Right.
And if you follow me on Goodreads or Classy on Goodreads, we seem to align a lot of the time. And if you like the stuff we like, I would say pass if you like what we like. But if you want something a little different, go ahead, go for it. Try it. Go for it. Yeah, you might like it.
Yeah. Just know when you go in that it's not going to be horror.
Yes. Or thriller, really.
Yeah. What did you say? More supernatural suspense?
Supernatural suspense with a disaster story.
See, we need to add our own. Maybe we need to make our shelf so people can see when they're on Goodreads. But it'll only be us.
Yeah.
But you know what? Maybe some other people will see that tag and list it too. As you know what? You're right. This is more of a disaster not end of the world, but disaster kind of genre. So yes, my 2, your 3.
Yes.
We haven't done that in a while.
Oh, I know. We were usually like this, like right on track with each other. But I don't know. And like I said, it gave me like a little bit of reminiscing feelings about the passage, even though they're polar opposites. But I feel like that was what he was striving for.
And see, I have not read the passage.
Which I love, you guys. Love! That is real horror right there for you. I mean, scary ass vampires that will kill you and eat you and torture you. It's great. And then you have, don't get me started. We can talk about this in the after show because I will just go for hours if I want to talk about this.
Yeah, I have not read the passage.
And I recommend it on audiobook because Scott Brick narrates it and he is freaking amazing. It's amazing how he can bend his voice. Oh my God.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
I might be sold. I said I'm open to stuff. I have been more open to different books and genres this year. So maybe. Yeah,
it's definitely something that I think in the beginning, the setup is big. So it might take a few hours to get into the groove of it just because the setup of such a big, vast story is required. But I feel like once you hit the ground, bing, it's good.
Okay. Kind of like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I guess that's it for us. Are we done talking about the chill?
Yes.
Because I totally got off topic there.
It's okay.
Okay. So yes, it was. Okay. So that's all for today, guys. And if you'd like to talk with us about the chill, you can find us both in Shelf Addiction Official on Facebook. And of course, you can find us on the internet, on Twitter and Instagram and all those fun places. And until next month, happy reading, guys. Take care.
Take care.
If you enjoyed today's book chat episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. You can follow me on Twitter at Shelf Addiction. Most importantly, you can share this podcast with friends and family that enjoy all things bookish, including author interviews. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.